Hi, everybody, and welcome back. So, Harry once again honored us with his wisdom, and the more I hear Harry speak on mental health issues, the more I'm convinced that he is losing his mind and getting crazier by the day. Well, either that or he's using heavier drugs and more regularly than before. In the past, it was clear that Harry came from a privileged background and was rather spoiled. But listening to him spewing his wisdom on this BetterUp podcast and discussion or video or whatever it's called, it is abundantly clear that there is something else going on with him. And whatever it is not good. Not for him or for the people who still idolize him. Without analyzing the complete talk or video, I'll highlight a few things which I found concerning and which brought me to the conclusion I came to. In the video, Harry claims that he suffered from burnout. Well, what is burnout? The official definition of burnout is as follows. Burnout is a syndrome conceptualized as resulting from chronic workplace stress that had not been successfully managed. It is characterized by three things: feelings of energy depletion or exhaustion, increased mental distance from one's job, or feelings of negativity or cynicism to one's job, and reduced professional efficiency. Burnout refers specifically to phenomena in the occupational context and should not be applied to describe experiences in other areas of life. The term burnout should thus not apply to Harry at all, regardless of how much stress he had been under in his life, and simply because he has never had a job before. Now, I'm not going to dispute that Harry had suffered from stress in his life. I'm sure he has. Everybody, young or old, rich or poor, suffers from stress at some point in his or her life. And I'm sure so has Harry. And the when, where, or why doesn't really matter. What matters in this discussion is that Harry obviously does not know what the term burnout means, and neither do his bosses at BetterUp, or they would not have allowed him to spew such vitriol. Yes, Harry may have suffered from PTSD, stress, anxiety, and depression after the death of his mother or after other negative incidents in his life, but not burnout by its definition. His job as royal or prince may have come with a certain amount of stress and anxiety. We cannot say it didn't, as none of us had ever walked a mile in his shoes. But we should also consider that the job of being a prince or working royal is more of a lifestyle than a job. It was something Harry was born into, something his father and mother, grandfather and grandmother, uncles and aunt lived and breathed every day of their lives since before he was born. To consider that a job, in the terms as we consider a job, would be rather naive and ignorant of us, even though there are aspects of it which may overlap or coincide with our idea of a job, like staff and paperwork, etc. But none of us had grown up in our jobs, woke up with our jobs, went to sleep with our jobs. No, being a royal, even a working royal, does not constitute a job in classical terms. Harry's time in the army did also not constitute a job, even had he been an active soldier. Being in the army is more of a calling than a job, and thus there are specific terms for soldiers suffering from depression and stress, etc., etc., such as PTSD. And then, of course, you get various levels of PTSD, but it cannot be termed burnout. Burnout is something completely different, which specifically relates to the commercial sector. Harry then waxes lyrical about taking time for inner work. He said, from an employer's perspective, you can't expect your people to put in the work on themselves when you are not giving them the time to do that. Oh my word, I thought employers were paying their staff to do specific tasks or jobs within their working hours. But that's me, that's what I always thought. Anyway, I nearly choked when I heard him say that. Okay, now most people work from 8 or 9 to 5, which means 8 or 9 hours per day, 5 days per week, thus 40 to 45 hours per week, for which they are getting paid by another party or entity. So, what about the other 123 hours? Let's assume you sleep 8 hours per night, so that makes up another 56 hours, and that leaves another 67 hours per week unaccounted for. And Harry must have a very, very, very serious problem if 67 hours per week is not enough for his inner work. People are also as different as their fingerprints, and I cannot imagine any employer being able to afford to have every employee analyzed to determine how much time he or she needs for inner work, and then to have to incorporate this time into their work hours. Nor can I imagine any employer being put in a position where he has to provide each employee the resources to successfully do inner work. It is just not feasible. However, most employers do give their employees annual leave and lunch hours, etc. Times which the employees can spend any which way they wish to. If it is your choice, you can meditate for an hour during your lunchtime or during your leave, whatever floats your boat. Later, Harry talks about lessons from the universe and saying life is about learning, right? If you are in your 20s, 30s, 40s, or even 50s, and you think you've got it sorted, then bad stuff is going to happen. But when bad things happen, there's a lesson there. I'm being schooled by the universe. There's something for me to learn. Oh, brilliant, Harry. I have no idea where Harry was actually going with this, but I assume he's trying to say that every bad thing that happens to you is actually the universe teaching you a lesson, or that is how you should see it. Well, I'm not against believing that life teaches us lessons. Actually, I believe that when we are open to it, we shall continue to learn until we lay our heads down. But for him to tell us that bad stuff will happen if we don't keep learning sounds like a threat more than anything else. Not all things, good or bad, are life lessons. Some are lessons in practicality, for instance, and some are purely what it is. For example, if you know there's a storm coming and you leave your window open, you will soon learn the error of your ways when you need to mop your floor. And this may then be seen as a lesson in practicality. However, if you are on your way somewhere and suddenly you have a flat tire and find that somewhere you must have driven over a small nail or a piece of glass or the valve just blew, you stop, you take off your 100% inflated spare tire, change the tires, and it still remains a bad thing that happened, but you did everything right. There was no lesson to be learned. It is just what I call happenstance. And you move on from it and you go on your merry way. In life, it is the same. There are things worth mulling over and worth taking life lessons from. But there are also things which are just happenstance, just coincidence, and not worth dissecting, but instead should just be moved on from. Can you imagine dissecting and trying to find a life lesson in absolutely everything? It will surely drive you insane. Harry's use of language here is also very juvenile. For example, the over exaggeration of age. Instead of saying in your 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, he could have said whether you're in your 20s or 50s, and then using the word stuff. It is clear that Harry has some idea of the concept he was trying to explain, but not a good enough understanding to convey it verbally. He continues this juvenile use of language, further illustrating his lack of fully understanding the subject, but rather sounds like he's acting like a fangirl who's following a guru with whom she is secretly in love or something like that, because he uses words like superpower and platitudes like it's a work in progress. Harry also uses the upward lilt, saying right at the end of each sentence, a habit, although a bad one, he clearly learned from Megan. The more Harry spoke, however, the clearer it became that he is further removed from reality than he had ever been as a royal. He talks about meditating every day, advocates for you to make it a habit in your daily routine, which is a great sentiment, but how practical is it for the average Joe or Susie working from 8 or 9 until 5 in the afternoon? He further adds that it is essential to take me time daily and that he puts in 45 minutes in the morning. Well, good for him. I agree that me time is important, but from personal experience, I can also tell you that as a married working woman or man with children, this is not always possible. And I do not like the privileged elite advocating it as a necessity, causing fear or guilt when you, as a normal person, cannot achieve it. If BetterUp or Harry had any savvy and were truly educated in psychology and mental health, they would have been on there rather advocating for micro stress release. The 10 minutes having your coffee or tea alone on your porch, taking a brisk walk to a store or in your neighborhood, and not trying to find the closest parking to an entrance, but to park further away to force yourself to take that walk to clear your head. They would advocate getting up from your desk every hour or so and stretching a bit and not place you under more stress to try and find the time for meditation and me time. In this video, Harry is also very animated and gesticulates wildly. Although some people see this as a sign of honesty and being truly engaged, it's not necessarily true. Like a favorite body language expert regularly states, every person has a baseline. Looking at Harry talking as a late teen or young man, and looking at him talking as a man in his early 30s, but before he met Megan, There is absolutely no sign of him waving and flapping his arms. I can only conclude that this, like his new form of speech, is learned behavior, and thus there is nothing sincere about it. Instead, it actually comes across as him being rather insecure and trying way too hard to convince others of the truthfulness of what he is selling. In this video, Harry reminds me of those old second-hand car salesman ads when TV just came out, where the guys were told to throw their arms open wide to look honest and welcoming. But instead, their gestures did not always match their words, and old Honest Al ended up looking like Al the Fence. Although gesticulating is normal and helps formulate ideas and to recollect memories, advice which Harry could benefit from is to keep his hands within the frame of his body and not to go above the shoulder area. You see, the higher the gesture, the more out of control you look. I have no idea what the outcome or best place for Harry would be, but I have a feeling that BetterUp is not it. Instead, I think Harry needs a good dose of reality instead of this constant, very expensive waffle. But let's move on. Serena Williams joined Harry and BetterUp CEO Alexi Robichaux, but really her performance was mediocre and not even worth getting into. I saw a few people on Instagram getting into her appearance and so on, but that's not my style, so I would rather just move on from Serena's presence and rather tell you something about Alexi, Harry's boss. Alexi studied at the University of Southern California, where he graduated with a BA in political science. He then worked for Walt Disney in business insight, planning, and forecasting for a year and 5 months. He then went on to the Glencoe Group, a management firm in private equity and venture capital, and he stayed there for a year and 2 months. He then worked for Socialcast for 8 months as product manager, and from there he moved to VMware, again in product management. But to be fair, Socialcast was bought by VMware, so in effect, he managed to stick it out for 28 months this time. In 2013, he became CEO and co-founder of BetterUp. Alexi's co-founder was Eddie Medina. Now, I cannot find Eduardo Medina's education record, but he worked as a consultant for Bain and Company, worked for Altamont Capital as a growth consultant for just under a year, etc., etc. But suffice it to say that it does not appear as if Alexi or Eduardo have any training in mental health or psychology. None, nada, nothing, nix, or bugger all. I thus feel absolutely entitled to share my opinion, and my opinion being that neither of these guys nor Harry has any real knowledge to sell you, and that they are indeed making it up as they go along. I do not care what the current value of the company is. I went on their website, had a look at some of their seminars, and in my opinion, it is one big sham and scam. A couple of youngish guys talking woke speak and in the process fooling with your mind. A foolery which will give you a temporary sense of well-being, but because it's not based on true study of psychology and mental health, it is doubtful that it will have a lasting effect. So, is it worth an employer paying a $499 monthly subscription fee? In my opinion, no. Last I saw, BetterUp was valued at 1.73, wait for it, billion with a B dollars. Now, at $5,988 per company per year, it may not be quite that easy to understand how they managed to collect this kind of money. Well, let me quickly explain. It is estimated that BetterUp earned approximately $267 million in subscriptions since 2016, or say over the last 5 years. But the rest is from investors and investments that they made. So, what is BetterUp? Is it this rah-rah motivational company, or is it an investment firm? You decide. I do not propose to tell you what to think, but personally, I cannot help but feel that employers could spend that money wiser and on more practical things than these rah-rah sessions without any true long-term value. Okay, guys and girls, there you have it. My honest opinion on our dear Henry and his employer. Make of it what you will. But thank you for joining me once again and take care of yourselves until we meet on the next one. Bye.